The first note sliced through the autumn fog like a blade, pure and impossible, and Willa Everhart stopped dead in the middle of the empty road, her breath catching not from fear but from the raw beauty of it. Everyone in Thornwick avoided the Iverness estate after dark. The locals whispered about the cursed Nightingale, how its song drove listeners mad, how 3 people had vanished over the decades after hearing it, how the old manor house crouched behind its iron gates like something waiting to devour the unwary. But Willa had walked this route home from the community center every Tuesday and Thursday for 2 years, and she had never heard anything except wind through the overgrown hedges and the occasional fox cry. She taught music to children who could barely afford instruments, who sang off-key and laughed too loud, and she loved every minute of it. Fear was not part of her vocabulary, especially not fear of a bird. The song came again, spiraling up from somewhere deep in the estate's tangled gardens. It was not a normal nightingale's melody. The notes held too much weight, too much sorrow, like a language she almost understood. Her fingers tightened on the strap of her worn canvas bag. She had studied birdsong as part of her degree, had transcribed dozens of recordings, and this was wrong in a way that made her chest ache. Without thinking, she whistled back. Not a random tune, but the exact phrase the nightingale had sung, note for perfect note. Her pitch was flawless. She had been whistling since she was 5 years old, could mimic anything she heard once. The silence that followed felt alive. Then, the nightingale answered, a different phrase this time, almost questioning. Willa grinned into the darkness. She whistled again, matching it, adding a small trill at the end like an invitation. This was better than any duet she had performed at university. The bird's technique was extraordinary, impossible really, and she wanted to understand it. Something in the gardens moved, not the rustle of leaves or the shift of shadows, but a presence, vast and old, turning its attention toward her like a spotlight. The air grew colder. Her breath misted white. The nightingale sang again, and this time she heard the desperation underneath the beauty. It was trying to tell her something. It was trying to break free. Willa stood there on the cracked pavement until her fingers went numb and her lips felt dry, whistling back every phrase, every variation. She lost track of time. When she finally walked home, her mind was spinning with melody, and she did not notice the pale face watching from the highest window of the manor, or the way the iron gates trembled against their chains. She came back 2 nights later. The nightingale was waiting. She could feel it before she heard it, that same enormous presence, and when the song began it was stronger than before, more complex, as though the bird had been practicing too. She laughed quietly and whistled the opening phrase back, leaning against the cold stone wall that bordered the estate. The fog was thicker tonight, turning the street lamps into ghosts of light. They traded melodies for an hour. Willa's training took over, analyzing the patterns, the way certain intervals repeated, the almost mathematical precision underneath the wild emotion. This was not instinct. This was composition. She pulled a small notebook from her bag and sketched the phrases by the light of her phone, humming under her breath. When she finally turned to leave, she felt the nightingale's silence like a hand reaching after her. It made her heart clench. She looked back at the dark mass of the estate, all overgrown ivy and shuttered windows, and whispered, "Tomorrow, I promise." She didn't know she had just spoken the first words the Vampire King had understood in 200 years. His name was Octavian Iverness, and he had been beautiful once, in the way that apex predators are beautiful, all sharp edges and lethal grace. He had ruled the vampire courts of 3 countries with absolute authority, had commanded armies, had been feared and respected in equal measure. Then he had rejected a marriage alliance with a powerful witch family, had called their youngest daughter a manipulative child in front of the assembled nobility, and her mother had smiled at him with eyes like winter and said, "You will sing alone until someone answers, and you will remain a beast until your song is complete." The curse had been elegant and vicious. By day he was trapped in the form of a nightingale, forced to sing the melody she had embedded in his throat, unable to fly beyond the estate's boundaries. By night he could take his true form, but he was still bound to the grounds, and his voice remained locked unless he sang the curse song. He could not speak. He could not call for help. The witch had structured it so that pity would never break it, so that anyone who hurt him would feel only dread and superstition, their fear feeding the curse's power. For 2 centuries he had sung into the void. His family was long dead, his court had crumbled. The other vampire lords had carved up his territory and forgotten him. The estate had fallen into ruin around him, and he had endured it with the stoic pride of someone who refused to break, even when breaking would have been a mercy. Then she had whistled back. The first time, it had shocked him so badly he had fallen silent, his small bird heart hammering against his ribs. No one had ever answered. No one had ever matched his pitch, his phrasing, his tone, and she had done it without hesitation, without fear, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. The curse had shuddered. He felt it crack, just slightly, a hairline fracture in something that had been seamless for so long. When night fell and he regained his human form, he had stood at the window of his ruined bedroom and touched his throat with shaking hands. His voice was still gone, but something had shifted. He could feel it. When she came back, he was ready. He sang the next part of the melody, the section he had never been able to share because no one had ever gotten past the first phrase. She whistled it back flawlessly, her breath fogging in the cold air, and he felt the curse crack wider. His left hand flickered, became solid for 3 full seconds before dissolving back into mist. He stared at it, stunned. She was breaking his curse without even knowing it, and she kept coming back. Willa started bringing her guitar on the 5th visit. She sat on the stone wall with her legs swinging and played harmonies underneath the Nightingale's melody, experimenting with chord progressions that fit the strange modal phrases. She was writing something, though she was not sure what yet. A suite, maybe, or a tone poem. Her students had noticed her distraction, the way she hummed odd intervals during lessons, but she had not told anyone about the Nightingale. This felt private, precious, like something that would shatter if she spoke it aloud. The bird song was changing. It was becoming a conversation, a genuine back and forth, and she found herself inventing new variations, testing to see if it would follow her. It always did. Sometimes it led, pulling her into melodic territory she would never have explored on her own, dark and strange and heartbreakingly lovely. She recorded some of their sessions on her phone, listened to them on repeat while she walked to work or made dinner in her tiny apartment. The music got under her skin, into her blood. She started dreaming about the estate. In the dreams, she walked through rooms filled with dusty grandeur, past portraits of pale aristocrats with eyes like winter stars, up spiral staircases that led to a tower where someone was waiting. She always woke before she saw his face. On the 10th night, she saw the figure in the window. It was just for a moment, a flash of white hair and marble skin, there and gone so quickly she thought she had imagined it. But her heart kicked against her ribs, and the Nightingale's song faltered before resuming, more urgent than before. Willa stared up at the dark house, her guitar forgotten on her lap. "Hello?" she called, her voice loud in the stillness. The Nightingale sang a single sharp note, almost a warning. The figure did not reappear, but she knew with a certainty that defied logic that someone was in there. Someone was listening. Someone was real. She should have been afraid. Every instinct, every ounce of common sense said she should leave and never come back. But Willa had spent her whole life being told she was too bold, too reckless, too quick to leap before looking, and she had never seen the point in changing. She slung her guitar over her shoulder, walked up to the iron gates, and pushed. They opened. The chains that had held them shut for decades fell away like paper. The path beyond was choked with weeds, but she could see the outline of it, the way it curved toward the manor's entrance. The Nightingale sang again, a whole cascade of notes, and she heard the invitation in it, the desperate plea. Willa stepped through the gates and did not look back. The gardens were a labyrinth of dead roses and broken statues, everything overgrown and wild, but there was a beauty to the decay that made her chest tighten. Moonlight filtered through the bare branches of ancient oaks, turning the world silver and black. She followed the path by instinct, her boots crunching on gravel, until she reached the manor's front steps. The doors were massive, carved with intricate patterns that might have been flowers or flames, and they swung open at her touch. The entrance hall was vast and empty, the floor a checkerboard of black and white marble, the walls lined with portraits of people who looked like they had never smiled in their lives. Dust covered everything. The air smelled like old stone and older secrets. And standing at the top of the grand staircase, barely visible in the shadows, was a man. He was tall and impossibly pale, his skin luminous in the darkness, his hair white as bone and falling past his shoulders. He wore clothes from another century, a dark coat and high collar, everything perfectly tailored despite the decay around him. His eyes caught the faint light and reflected it back like a cat's, silver and inhuman. He did not move. He did not speak, but the intensity of his gaze hit her like a physical force, and she understood suddenly and completely what he was. Vampire. The word should have sent her running. Instead, she felt a strange calm settle over her, the same calm she felt before a performance, when the world narrowed down to just the music and nothing else mattered. She set her guitar case down carefully and looked up at him. "You're the Nightingale," she said. He inclined his head just slightly, and the motion was so full of restrained power that she felt her pulse quicken. When he opened his mouth, nothing came out. He touched his throat, frustration flickering across his face, and tried again. Silence. Willa's mind raced. A vampire who could not speak, who was bound to this place, who had been singing the same melody for who knew how long. A curse. It had to be a curse, and she had been answering it. "Can you sing?" she asked. "The Nightingale song, I mean." His expression shifted, something almost like hope breaking through the stoic mask. He nodded. "Then sing," she said simply, "and I'll whistle with you. We'll figure this out." She saw him hesitate, saw the way he held himself like someone who had not relied on another person in centuries, like trust was a language he had forgotten. Then he closed his eyes, and the song poured out of him, low and resonant and achingly beautiful, his voice filling the ruined hall with sound that should not have been possible. Willa whistled the harmony she had been building in her mind, weaving around his melody, supporting it, challenging it, making it whole. The curse shuddered. She felt it in the air, a vibration that went through her bones. Cracks of light appeared along the walls, spiderwebbing out from where he stood, and his form solidified, became more real, more present. He opened his eyes and stared at her with an expression she could not name. They finished the phrase together, and the silence that followed was different. Softer. Waiting. "My name is Willa," she said, picking up her guitar case. "Willa Everhart, and I think we have a lot of work to do." He descended the stairs with a predator's grace, each step deliberate, and when he reached the bottom he bowed to her, a gesture so old-fashioned and courtly that it made her smile. Then he pulled a piece of paper from his coat pocket, something he must have prepared, and handed it to her. The handwriting was elegant, precise. "Octavian Iverness, 200 years, thank you." She looked up at him, at this impossibly beautiful creature who had been trapped and alone for longer than she could imagine, and felt her heart twist with something fierce and protective. "We're going to break this," she told him, "whatever it takes." His answering look said he believed her. They worked through the night. Octavian could not speak except through the curse song, but he communicated through written notes and gestures, his movements economical and commanding even in silence. He showed her the library, a massive room filled with books on magic and history, many of them crumbling with age. She found references to song curses, to magic that bound voice and form, but nothing that explained exactly how to break them. Most of the texts agreed that such curses required a specific key, a condition that had to be met, but what that condition was varied wildly. True love's kiss was mentioned frequently, and Willa rolled her eyes every time. "That's not how this works," she muttered, flipping through another volume. "You're not some princess in a tower. This is about the song itself, the structure of it. There has to be a final phrase, something that completes the melody." Octavian nodded, wrote quickly. "The witch never finished it in front of me. I only know the parts she forced into my throat. There are gaps." "Then we fill them," Willa said, looking up at him with determination. "You're a composer, right? You have to be to sing like that." He hesitated, then nodded again. "I was. Before." "Then you still are." She stood, brushing dust from her jeans. "We're going to write the ending to this song together, and when we sing it, the curse will break. I'm sure of it." He watched her with those unsettling silver eyes, and she could see him weighing her words, deciding whether to trust this strange mortal who had walked into his prison without fear. Finally, he wrote, "Why are you helping me?" Willa thought about it, about the nights she had spent whistling to a bird in the dark, about the way the music had filled something hollow inside her that she had not even known was there. "Because the song was lonely," she said quietly, "and I know what that feels like. Because you answered me when I answered you, and that matters. And because no one deserves to be trapped like this, not for 200 years, not for any amount of time." Something in his expression cracked, just slightly, a glimpse of the man underneath the centuries of control. He reached out slowly and touched her hand, his fingers ice cold and careful, as though he were afraid she would vanish if he held on too tight. She did not pull away. They began composing the next morning, or what passed for morning in the estate's perpetual gloom. Octavian could only hold human form for a few hours at a time now, the curse still mostly intact, and when dawn came, he dissolved into mist and feathers, the Nightingale appearing in his place. But Willa stayed, curled up in the library with her guitar and a stack of manuscript paper, working through melodic possibilities while the bird perched on the back of a chair and sang fragments to her. It was the strangest collaboration she had ever experienced. He would sing a phrase, she would try variations on her guitar, and he would trill approval or displeasure until they found something that fit. Slowly, painstakingly, the song grew. It was not like anything she had written before, too old and strange for modern ears, but it had a power that made her shiver every time they played it through. 3 days passed. She called in sick to work, ignored the worried texts from her friends, and lost herself in the music. Octavian wrote her notes about his life before the curse, about the politics of the vampire courts, about the witch who had bound him and why. Her name had been Morgantha, and she had been powerful, ambitious, determined to use a marriage alliance to control the entire vampiric underworld. When Octavian refused, when he made it clear he would never be anyone's pawn, she had made sure he would never refuse anything again. "She wanted me broken," he wrote, "wanted me to beg for release. I never did." "Of course you didn't," Willa said, reading over his shoulder. "You're too stubborn." He glanced at her, and she could have sworn she saw amusement in those pale eyes. They ate together, or rather she ate while he watched, fascinated by the simple act of her making sandwiches in his ruined kitchen. He did not need food, had not needed it since he was turned over 400 years ago, but he brought her wine from a cellar that should not have survived 2 centuries, and poured it with the care of someone who remembered what hospitality meant. She told him about her students, about the satisfaction of watching a child discover they could make something beautiful with their own voice. He listened with an intensity that made her feel like the most important person in the world. On the 4th night, she fell asleep in the library, her head pillowed on her arms, and woke to find a blanket draped over her shoulders and Octavian sitting across from her, reading by candlelight. He looked up when she stirred, and she saw the softness in his face, the way his guard had lowered inch by inch over the days they had spent together. "Hi," she said, her voice rough with sleep. He set down his book and wrote, "You should go home. This is not safe for you." "I'm not leaving." She sat up, rubbing her eyes. "We're almost done, I can feel it. Another few days and we'll have the complete melody." "The witch's family will feel it too," he wrote, his handwriting sharper. "When the curse breaks, they will know. They will come." Willa felt a chill run down her spine, but she kept her voice steady. "Then we'll deal with them. You're not doing this alone anymore, Octavian." He stared at her for a long moment, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes, the centuries of isolation fighting against the fragile trust she had built. Then, he reached out and took her hand, lacing their fingers together, his skin still cold but warming slightly against hers. "I will protect you," he wrote with his free hand, "no matter what." I know," she said, squeezing his fingers, "but I'm going to protect you too. That's how this works." She saw him struggle with that, with the idea of needing protection, of accepting it from a human, no less, but he did not let go of her hand, and when she drifted back to sleep, he stayed beside her until dawn turned him back into a bird. The song was nearly complete when the first sign of trouble came. Willa was outside, sitting on the crumbling stone wall, playing through the new sections on her guitar while Octavian sang above her in his nightingale form. The melody was huge now, sprawling and complex, full of themes that wove in and out of each other like a conversation. She could feel the curse straining against it, could see the way the estate's shadows lightened when they played, as though the music was burning away old magic. Then she felt the eyes on her. She stopped playing mid-measure, her skin prickling. Someone was watching from the road just beyond the estate's boundary. She could not see them clearly in the fading light, but she sensed hostility, cold and focused. The nightingale's song cut off abruptly, and she heard the sharp alarm in the silence. "Who's there?" she called, her voice carrying across the overgrown garden. A woman stepped forward into the lamplight, and Willa's breath caught. She was beautiful in a way that felt wrong, all sharp angles and pale skin, her dark hair swept up in an elaborate style that belonged to a different century. She wore modern clothes, a sleek black coat and heeled boots, but she moved with the same predatory grace as Octavian, and her eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. "How interesting," the woman said, her voice like silk over broken glass. "Little mortal girl, playing with curses she doesn't understand." Willa stood slowly, her hand tightening on her guitar's neck. "I understand it just fine, and you're not welcome here." The woman laughed, a sound with no warmth in it. "Not welcome in my own family's handiwork? Child, that creature you've been singing to belongs to us. The curse is ours. And when I tell my grandmother that someone has been trying to break it, she will be very, very displeased." The nightingale dove from its perch, landing on Willa's shoulder, its tiny claws gripping her jacket. She could feel the tension in its small body, the barely restrained fury. This had to be someone from Morgantha's line, come to check on the curse after feeling it weaken. "He doesn't belong to anyone," Willa said, her fear transmuting into anger, "and your family had no right to do this to him." "No right?" The woman's smile widened, showing teeth that were slightly too sharp. "He insulted us in front of the assembled courts. He called my great-aunt a manipulative child and refused an alliance that would have benefited everyone. He earned his fate." 200 years for hurting someone's pride? Willa shook her head. "That's not justice, that's cruelty." "Perhaps." The woman took a step closer to the boundary, testing it. "But it's our cruelty to maintain. Stop singing to him, little girl. Go home. Forget about this place, or I will make you forget, and it won't be pleasant." The nightingale sang a single vicious note, and Willa felt the curse pulse in the air, felt the way Octavian was fighting it, trying to manifest, to protect her. She put her hand over the small bird, steadying it. "No," she said simply. "We're going to finish the song. We're going to break the curse, and there's nothing you can do to stop us." The woman's expression went cold and flat. "We'll see about that, mortal. We'll see." She turned and walked away, dissolving into shadow before she reached the end of the street, and Willa was left standing alone in the darkness, her heart pounding, the nightingale trembling against her neck. When night fell and Octavian regained his form, he was furious in a way that was terrifying to witness. He could not shout, could not even speak, but the rage radiating off him made the air feel electric. He paced the length of the library like a caged wolf, his movements sharp and violent, and when he finally grabbed his pen, his handwriting was nearly illegible. "You leave. Tonight. This is no longer safe." "I already told you I'm not leaving," Willa said, standing her ground, even though every instinct screamed at her to step back to give him space. "We're so close, Octavian. A few more days and the song will be complete. A few more days and Morgantha's heir will return with the full coven. They will kill you to protect the curse. I will not allow that. And I won't allow you to stay trapped for another 200 years. She crossed the distance between them, grabbed his hands, forced him to look at her. "We're doing this together or not at all. I'm not afraid of them." "You should be," he wrote, his free hand shaking. "I have seen what they can do. They will take your voice, your memories, everything that makes you yourself, and they will enjoy it. Then we finish the song before they come back." She held his gaze, refusing to flinch. "We work through the night, every night until it's done, and when they show up, we'll be ready." He pulled his hands free, turned away from her, his whole body rigid with frustration and fear. She had never seen him like this, had not realized how much control he usually maintained, but she understood suddenly what was happening underneath the anger. He cared about her. Somewhere in the last week and a half, between the music and the late-night conversations and the quiet moments of shared understanding, he had started to care, and it was tearing him apart. She walked up behind him, slowly, and rested her forehead against his back. She felt him go still. "I'm not leaving you," she said quietly. "I know you're used to being alone, used to handling everything yourself. But that's over now. You have me, and I'm staying, and we're going to break this curse together. Do you understand?" The silence stretched out, long and heavy. Then he turned carefully and pulled her into his arms, his chin resting on the top of her head. He was so cold, his body like marble, but his grip was gentle, almost reverent. She felt him shaking. When he finally let go, he wrote, "If anything happens to you, I will destroy them all." "Nothing is going to happen to me," she said firmly, "because you're going to protect me, and I'm going to protect you, and we're both going to survive this. Now come on, we have work to do." They composed through the night and into the next day, barely stopping to rest. The final section of the song was the hardest, requiring a balance between Octavian's original melody and the new themes Willa had introduced, a resolution that honored both the pain of the curse and the hope of its breaking. They tried dozens of variations, arguing wordlessly through music and scribbled notes, pushing each other toward something neither could have created alone. When they finally found it, when Willa played the last phrase and Octavian sang it back and the curse shattered like glass in the air around them, she knew they had done something extraordinary. The melody was complete. It was perfect, and it was the most beautiful thing she had ever heard. Octavian stood in the middle of the library, fully solid for the first time in 2 centuries, staring at his hands as though he could not believe they were real. Then he opened his mouth and spoke, his voice rough from disuse, but unmistakably his own. "Willa." Just her name, but the way he said it, the sheer relief and wonder in it, made her eyes sting with tears. She crossed to him, laughing, and he caught her up in his arms, lifting her off the ground, his face buried in her hair. She felt him shudder, felt the 200 years of loneliness and pain finally breaking, and held on as tightly as she could. "You did it," she whispered. "You're free." "We did it," he corrected, setting her down but not letting go. His eyes were bright, burning with an intensity that stole her breath. "I could not have done this without you. I would never have survived without you." She reached up, touched his face, traced the sharp line of his jaw. He leaned into her palm like a man starving for touch, and she realized with a jolt that he probably was. 200 years without contact, without warmth, without anything except stone walls and his own thoughts. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," he said, his voice gaining strength, "we prepare for the coven, because Morgantha's descendant will have felt the curse break, and she will come with reinforcements to try and recast it, and I will not let them touch you." The words should have frightened her. Instead, she felt a fierce determination settle into her bones. They had come too far to fail now. The coven arrived 2 nights later, 6 witches in total, all of them wearing black and moving with the coordinated precision of a hunting pack. Morgantha herself was at their head, and she was exactly as Octavian had described, beautiful, cold, ancient beyond measure, her power rolling off her in waves that made Willa's teeth ache. They gathered at the estate's boundary, their combined magic pushing against the wards Octavian had spent 2 days reinforcing. "Come out, vampire," Morgantha called, her voice carrying across the gardens. "Come out and face what you've done." Willa stood in the entrance hall beside Octavian, her guitar in her hands, her heart hammering but her resolve steady. He had spent the last 2 days teaching her everything he could about magical combat, about how curses worked, about the coven's likely tactics. She was not a fighter, but she was a musician, and music was its own kind of magic. "Stay behind me," Octavian said, his voice calm despite the danger outside. He was magnificent like this, every inch the vampire king he had once been, his presence filling the hall with authority. "No matter what happens, stay behind me." "We're partners," Willa reminded him, "which means we stand together." He looked at her, and something in his expression shifted, became softer. "You are extraordinary," he said quietly. "I have lived 400 years, and I have never met anyone like you." "Good," she said, smiling despite her fear, "because I'm not letting you go." He leaned down and kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it made her chest ache, and then they walked out together to face the coven. Morgantha's expression when she saw Octavian whole and free was almost worth the terror of the situation. Her eyes widened just slightly, and then narrowed with fury. "Impossible," she hissed. "The curse was perfect. It should have held for eternity." "Nothing is perfect," Octavian said, his voice carrying the weight of 2 centuries. "And your curse was flawed from the beginning. It required an answer, genuine and willing, and you never anticipated that anyone would give it. So you found a foolish mortal to sing with you." Morgantha's gaze flicked to Willa, dismissive and cruel. "How touching. It changes nothing. We'll simply cast it again, stronger this time, and kill your little pet so she can't interfere." Willa felt Octavian go rigid beside her, felt the barely contained violence in him, and stepped forward before he could move. "You're not casting anything," she said, her voice steady, "because the song is complete now. The curse has no anchor left, and if you try to hurt him again, you'll have to go through me." Morgantha laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "Brave words from someone who has no power. Child, I could stop your heart with a thought. I could turn your bones to dust. What exactly do you think you can do against me?" Willa lifted her guitar, settled it into position, and met the witch's eyes without flinching. "I can sing," she said simply, "and he can sing with me. And together, our music is stronger than your hate." She began to play before Morgantha could respond, her fingers flying over the strings, pulling out the melody she and Octavian had spent so many nights perfecting. It rang out across the gardens, pure and defiant, and she heard Octavian join her, his voice blending with the guitar, turning the song into something that shook the air itself. The coven reacted immediately, throwing up magical shields, beginning counterspells, but the music cut through their defenses like a knife through paper. This was not just any song. This was the anti-curse, the answer to 200 years of suffering, and it carried a power that no amount of training could overcome. Willa saw Morgantha's face twist with rage, saw her raise her hands to strike, and kept playing. She poured everything she had into the music, every ounce of determination and hope and fierce protectiveness she felt for the man singing beside her. The melody swelled, grew, became a wall of sound that pushed the coven back step by step. Then, Morgantha screamed something in a language Willa did not recognize, and the world exploded into chaos. Magic lashed out, wild and vicious, tearing up chunks of earth, shattering the remaining windows of the manor. Octavian moved faster than Willa could track, putting himself between her and the attacks, his own power flaring up to meet the coven's. He was not just a vampire. He was an ancient, a king, and his fury was a tangible thing, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. But there were 6 of them, and only one of him, and Willa saw him falter, saw blood bloom black against his white shirt where a spell had slipped through his defenses. She did not think. She just stepped up beside him and played harder, faster, her voice joining the guitar, whistling the high harmony that cut through everything else. The song changed. It became a weapon, a shield, a declaration. Octavian picked up her harmony, wove his voice around it, and together they created something that the coven could not match. The magic in the air began to turn, to twist back on itself, and Willa saw panic flicker across Morgantha's face for the first time. "This isn't possible," the witch snarled, but her voice was weaker now, strained. "You're just a mortal." "I'm a musician," Willa corrected, her fingers never stopping. "And this is what I do." The final phrase of the song rose up between them, the resolution that had taken so long to find. And when Willa and Octavian sang it together in perfect unison, the remaining threads of the curse shattered completely. The backlash hit the coven like a shockwave, throwing them backward, breaking their formation. Morgantha herself stumbled, her perfect composure cracking, and Octavian was there in an instant, his hand around her throat, lifting her off the ground. "You will never touch her," he said, his voice cold and absolute. "You will never touch me. You will leave this place and never return, or I will show you exactly what a vampire king can do when someone threatens what he loves." Willa's heart stuttered at that last word, but she kept playing, kept the music going, giving him the support he needed. Morgantha clawed at his hand, her magic sputtering uselessly against his grip, and when he finally dropped her, she collapsed to the ground, gasping. "This isn't over," she spat, but the words were empty, and everyone knew it. "Yes," Octavian said quietly. It is. The coven retreated, dragging Morgantha with them, dissolving into shadows and smoke, and leaving nothing behind except scorched earth and silence. Willa let the final notes of the song fade away, her hands shaking with exhaustion, and then Octavian turned to her and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You are insane," he said into her hair, but she heard the awe in his voice, the disbelief. "You stood against a coven for me." "Of course I did," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. "I told you. We're partners." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his pale eyes blazing with emotion. "I love you," he said, the words raw and honest. "I have no right to. I know that. You are mortal and brilliant and far too good for me. But I love you, Willa Everhart, and I will love you until the stars go cold." She laughed, giddy with relief and exhaustion and joy. "That's good," she said, reaching up to cup his face, "because I love you too, and I have no intention of going anywhere." He kissed her then, deep and desperate, as though he could pour 200 years of loneliness into the contact and have her heal it all. She kissed him back with everything she had, tasting blood and smoke and forever, and when they finally broke apart, they were both shaking. "There's something you need to know," he said, his forehead resting against hers. "If we do this, if we stay together, you will age, and I will not. You will have decades, and I will have eternity. I cannot turn you unless you ask, unless you choose it freely, and even then it is a terrible thing to become." Willa considered this, thought about mortality and time and the life she had built. Then she thought about the music they made together, about the way he looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, about the future they could have. "Ask me again in a year," she said. "Let's have time to be sure, time to know this is real. But Octavian, I'm not afraid of eternity, not if I spend it with you." The smile that broke across his face was radiant, transforming him from something cold and perfect into something warm and real. "A year," he agreed, "and then we will decide together." They spent the next weeks rebuilding. Octavian's wealth, it turned out, had been carefully managed by a law firm that specialized in immortal clients, and he had more than enough resources to restore the estate to its former glory. Willa helped him choose new furniture, pick out paint colors, clear the gardens. She brought her students to see the grounds once they were safe, and they ran wild through the roses, their laughter echoing off the old stone walls. She moved in properly after a month, turning one of the upper rooms into a music studio where she could teach and compose. Octavian listened to every lesson, fascinated by the children's progress, and more than once she found him humming the songs they had practiced. He was gentle with them, careful to stay in the shadows during the day when his vampiric nature was most obvious, but they adored him anyway, called him Mr. Iverness, and asked him questions about the portraits on the walls. At night, they played together. Sometimes it was the curse-breaking song, which had become something of a personal anthem, but more often it was new compositions, experiments, collaborations that pushed both of their skills. They performed once at the local community center, a small concert that drew a surprisingly large crowd, and Willa watched the way people responded to Octavian's voice, the way they leaned forward in their seats, entranced. "You could have been famous," she said afterward, helping him pack away the sheet music. "I was famous," he replied, amused. 200 years ago. I find I prefer this, actually. Small audiences. People who listen because they want to, not because they're afraid to offend me." She kissed his cheek, smiling. "Good, because I'm not sharing you with the world. You're mine." "Always," he said, catching her hand and lacing their fingers together. "Always yours." The year passed in a blur of music and laughter and quiet domesticity. They traveled some, Octavian showing her the cities he had once ruled, now changed beyond recognition. They argued about politics and art and the best way to make tea. They spent long nights in the library, reading to each other, debating philosophy and history. And slowly, inevitably, Willa became certain of what she wanted. On the anniversary of the night she had first whistled to the Nightingale, she found Octavian waiting for her in the garden, standing beside the stone wall where she had sat so many times. The roses were in full bloom now, the air sweet with their scent, and the moon turned everything silver. "You remembered," she said, joining him. "I remember everything about you. he replied, turning to face her. His expression was serious, uncertain in a way she rarely saw. It's been a year. It has. She took his hands, held them tight. And I know what I want. I want forever, Octavian, with you. I want to see centuries pass, to make music until the end of time, to never have to say goodbye. I want to become what you are. She saw relief and joy and terror flicker across his face in quick succession. It's not an easy thing, he warned. The turning is painful, and once it's done, there's no going back. You'll need blood. You'll lose the sunlight. You'll watch everyone you know age and die while you remain. I know, she said simply, and I still choose it. I choose you. He pulled her close, his arms wrapped around her like he could shield her from the consequences of her decision. I will make it as painless as I can, he promised, and I will be with you every moment. You will never face this alone. I know that too, she said, tilting her head back to look at him. When do we start? Tonight, he said. If you're certain. I have prepared everything, consulted with the old texts, ensured I know exactly what to do. But Willa, if you have even a shred of doubt— She kissed him, stopping the words. No doubts, she said against his mouth. Just us, just forever. The turning was every bit as painful as he had warned, a fire that consumed her from the inside out, remaking every cell. But true to his word, Octavian never left her side, held her through the worst of it, whispered reassurances and love into her ear. When she finally woke 3 days later, the world had changed. Colors were sharper, sounds were clearer, and the hunger that gnawed at her stomach was like nothing she had ever experienced. Octavian taught her everything, patient and thorough, and she learned quickly how to control the new instincts, how to feed without killing, how to move through the night like she had been born to it. Her music changed too, her hearing now able to pick up nuances she had never noticed before, and she spent hours experimenting with her enhanced abilities. How do you feel? He asked one evening, finding her in the music room, transcribing a melody she had heard in the wind. Alive, she said, looking up with a grin that showed her new fangs. More alive than I've ever been. Is that strange? Not at all. He crossed to her, pulled her into his lap, kissed the top of her head. You were always meant for this, I think. You were never meant to be ordinary. Neither were you, she pointed out. Even cursed, even trapped, you were extraordinary. I was surviving, he corrected. Now I'm living. Because of you. They sat there together as the night deepened, wrapped in each other and the music that had brought them together, and Willa thought about the future stretching out ahead of them. Centuries of compositions to write, places to see, students to teach. Decades of waking up beside him, of feeling his cold skin warm under her touch, of knowing that they had beaten the curse and the coven and time itself. 5 years later, the estate was unrecognizable. What had once been a ruin was now a thriving music school, one of the most prestigious in the country. Students came from all over to study with Willa and Octavian, to learn in the place where the legendary curse-breaking song had been composed. The gardens were immaculate, the manor beautifully restored, and every evening ended with a concert in the grand hall, the acoustics perfect, the atmosphere magical. The local town had embraced them, or at least embraced the story of them. The official version was that Octavian was a reclusive composer who had finally decided to open his family's estate to the public, and that Willa was the brilliant young teacher who had convinced him to do it. No one knew about the vampirism, the curse, the coven. Those were secrets they guarded carefully, shared only with a trusted few. On the anniversary of the curse breaking, they held a special concert, performing the complete song for an audience of hundreds. Willa played guitar and sang harmony, while Octavian's voice filled every corner of the hall, and when they finished, the crowd rose in a standing ovation that lasted for minutes. Afterward, people approached them with tears in their eyes, telling them how the music had touched them, had healed something inside them they had not known was broken. This is what it was for, Willa said quietly, standing in the garden afterward, watching the guests mingle on the lawn. The curse, the pain, all of it, it brought us here. Octavian wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. I would not change it, he admitted. If I had to live those 200 years again to find you, I would do it without hesitation. She turned in his embrace, looked up at him with eyes that now matched his, silver and immortal. "We're going to do something amazing," she said. "You and me. We're going to change the world with music." "We already have," he replied, but he was smiling, that rare, genuine expression she loved more than anything. "But yes, let's change it again. And again. For as long as we have." They kissed as the sun set behind them, two immortals who had found each other across centuries and curses, and the nightingale that had once been Octavian's prison sang from the roses, free and joyful, its voice blending with the distant sound of music from the hall. The estate flourished, their school grew, and every night when the students had gone home and the halls were quiet, Willa and Octavian would sit together in the library or the garden and compose, their voices twining together in harmonies that seemed to make the very air shimmer. They wrote symphonies and songs, operas and lullabies, each piece a testament to the love that had broken an ancient curse and built something beautiful in its place. Decades passed, then a century. The world changed around them, but they remained constant and together, teaching generation after generation of musicians, preserving the old techniques while embracing the new. The story of the cursed nightingale became a legend, then a fairy tale, and eventually people stopped believing it had ever been real. But Willa and Octavian knew the truth, carried it with them every day, and sometimes, when the moon was full and the roses were blooming, they would go out to the old stone wall and whistle duets into the darkness, remembering. They never regretted it, not once. Not the curse, not the turning, not the choice to bind their lives together for eternity. Because they had something rare and precious, something most people only dreamed of, a love that had been forged in fire and music, that had survived witches and time and every obstacle the world could throw at them. And every morning, when they retreated to their private chambers to sleep away the daylight, Octavian would pull Willa close and whisper the same words he had said 100,000 times before. "I love you. Always." And she would whisper back, her smile audible in her voice, "I love you too. Forever." Outside, the nightingales sang in the garden, their voices echoing across the estate, and the music went on, eternal and unbroken, a testament to the girl who had whistled back and the vampire king whose curse had shattered at the sound of her fearless reply. The estate stood as a beacon of beauty and art, a place where magic lived not in curses but in melodies, where two souls who should never have met had found each other and built something that would outlast kingdoms and ages. Students who graduated from their school went on to become legends in their own right, carrying forward the techniques and the passion they had learned in those hallowed halls, spreading music across the world like a blessing. The town of Thornwick became known for its thriving arts scene, for the concerts that drew people from across the globe, for the mysterious but beloved couple who ran the estate with such grace and dedication. Children grew up hearing the story of the nightingale, were taught to be brave and kind, and always answer when something beautiful called to them. The estate's gates, once rusted shut and wrapped in chains, stood open day and night, welcoming anyone who wished to learn, to listen, to be part of the magic. Willa and Octavian watched their legacy grow with quiet satisfaction, never seeking recognition, but deeply fulfilled by the impact they had made. They sponsored scholarships for talented students who could not afford tuition, commissioned new works from promising composers, and preserved ancient techniques that would otherwise have been lost to time. The library that had once been Octavian's prison became a treasure trove of musical knowledge, open to all who wished to study there. As the second century of their life together began, they added a new wing to the estate, a concert hall with perfect acoustics, designed by the finest architects and engineers. The opening night was spectacular, a performance of the curse-breaking song followed by a new composition they had written together, a symphony that told the story of their love without words. The audience sat in reverent silence, many weeping openly, and when the final note faded away, the applause was thunderous. "We did it," Willa said backstage, her hand in Octavian's, both of them glowing with the success of the evening. "We built something that will outlast us." "Nothing will outlast us," Octavian replied, pulling her close. "We have eternity, remember? But yes, we have built something extraordinary, just as you always said we would." That night, after the guests had departed and the estate was quiet, they walked through the gardens hand in hand, talking about their plans for the next century. More students to teach, more music to compose, more lives to touch. They spoke of traveling again, of visiting the great concert halls of the world, of finding new inspiration in unfamiliar places. But always, they agreed, they would return here, to the estate that had been both prison and sanctuary, to the place where a fearless girl had whistled back to a cursed nightingale and changed everything. They paused at the stone wall, that sacred spot where it had all begun, and Octavian lifted his face to the moon and sang. His voice was rich and powerful, carrying across the gardens and beyond, and Willa whistled the harmony, the same notes she had given him so many years ago. The sound rose into the night sky, pure and true, and somewhere in the darkness other nightingales answered, their songs weaving together into something that felt like benediction. "Thank you," Octavian said quietly, turning to face her, "for hearing me when no one else did, for answering when anyone else would have fled, for loving me enough to break an ancient curse and stay by my side forever." "Thank you for being worth it," Willa replied, reaching up to touch his face, "for trusting me when you had every reason not to, for teaching me what forever really means, for giving me a life beyond anything I could have imagined." They stood there in the moonlight, two immortal souls who had found each other against all odds, who had turned suffering into beauty and loneliness into love. The estate glowed behind them, warm and welcoming, full of music and laughter and hope. And as they walked back toward the manor, arms around each other, they knew with absolute certainty that they had made the right choice, that they would continue to make it every day for as long as time itself endured. The nightingales sang on into the dawn, their voices carrying the story far and wide, a tale of courage and music and love that conquered even death. And in the heart of the estate, in the private chambers where daylight never reached, Willa and Octavian lay together in peaceful sleep, her head on his chest, his arms wrapped protectively around her, both of them smiling softly, dreaming of the music they would make tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that, forever and always. Two halves of a perfect harmony that nothing in heaven or earth could ever break again.